Hello everyone, this is lecture number 10 in a series of lectures entitled Thought as Word Dynamics, which is my personal approach to artificial intelligence that was started to be implemented in the late 80s in a project for British Telecom, an artificial intelligence project for British Telecom that was entitled ANELA, Associative Network with Emergent Logical and Learning Abilities. I've established so far in the prior lectures that we have in our brain a network. That's not new, that's not innovative, but that some hypotheses how that network is organized in terms of memory storage and memory retrieval. And what I assume is that Aristotle's view that the elementary unit of storage of memory in our brain is probably, as he says, the association to what we can call two words. Two words together mean something, said Aristotle, and that's what he called the categories. The 10 perspectives in which words, a pair of words can be associated. I recalled in lecture number 9 what are these categories of Aristotle, which is like a place in time, place in space, being next to each other, having particular types of properties and so on. And what was underlined right away that out of these 10 categories of Aristotle, one has got a particular role to play, which is a substrate, a substance. When talking about that substance in ancient Chinese philosophy, in the centuries BC, people were talking about what has been translated in English as stuffs or swords. A substance as a stuff, and that stuff can have properties. A rose can be red, can be blue, can be white, and so on. In the first part of chapter 8, which is called The Network Has Two Principles of Organization, Hereditary and Endogenous, I've talked essentially about the way that the ancient Chinese, approached the idea in terms of stuffs being penetrable and impenetrable. The impenetrable is very much what corresponds to the substance that Aristotle was talking about. Something that has a shape and that has a matter. That's a kind of stuff. And to use the vocabulary of René Thom, the mathematician, some different type of fluids can invade, can wet these stuffs, like being white, being blue, having some type of properties. And to some extent, the substance as a category in Aristotle is special because that's the one that gets coated by the other types of properties. The Chinese had understood, and that's the subject of lecture number 9, that you can put an infinite number of penetrables on top of an impenetrable. You can say of a particular animal, let's say a dog, that it is in Rome, that it's in Rome yesterday, that it has that color of coat, and things of that type. But there's only one impenetrable at any time in one particular place. The example I was giving, if Peter is sitting on this particular chair, Paul can either sit on his knees or be there another day at a different time than Peter is, but not at the same time. Two substances can't be at the same time in the same place. The Chinese had that interesting idea that you can make higher up categories by taking two names of stuffs together. If you say oxen and horse, you can get the idea of traction animals. You can create. We would say in a Western language, we say traction animals. They would say ox horse, and that would be the same idea. Or they would say water mountain, and that would create the concept of nature. We say nature, but at the same time, we don't hear immediately that nature is essentially made out of water and of mountains or hills, pieces of land. The Greek cat and the ancient Greek have another way of approach, this idea of stuffs being combined in one way or other. And in particular, Aristotle himself introduced a different way of looking at things. The ancient Greek way, that's part 2 of that chapter after the penetrable and impenetrable of the Chinese. The ancient Greek way, essential versus accidental properties. And now I'm turning to the to reading aloud and commenting my chapter. There is another distinction Aristotle made in addition to that of primary substance and secondary substance. Secondary substance is very much like saying for a particular person that it is a human being, that it is a mammal, that is a vertebrate, and so on. These are the secondary substances according to Aristotle. But he's got another approach, which is to make there's another distinction Aristotle made relative to the way things and states of affairs are, or at least to the way they seem to us, that between essential and accidental properties. Essential properties are those that characterize as such a particular type of stuff. It is an essential property of a particular man that he's a speaking creature, or that he's aware of his own mortality. But that this particular man is blind in one eye, or that he doesn't shave his beard, is an accidental property of his. This is not proper to all human beings. Concepts, universal words like birds or bees, that is, labels, I will consistently refer to them, are constituted only of essential properties, and this is what makes them conceptual. Individuals, like you or I, are exemplars, as I will consistently call them. These exemplars are bundles of properties. Some are essential, some accidental, and this is what makes them empirical as opposed to conceptual. To a particular combination of essential properties corresponds a single stuff or sort. This is why it is possible to define unambiguously a particular sort through its essential properties, i.e. the characterization of its essence. When saying that man is a speaking creature who is aware of his own mortality, we're getting closer to a definition of man as a stuff distinct from every other stuff. When saying that some men are blind in one eye, or that some grow a beard, we're moving away from the essence to progress into the infinite variety of singular exemplars. This feature that labels only hold essential properties, while exemplars combine essential and accidental properties, allows, or is a consequence of, a very constructive relationship between exemplars and labels. Exemplars fall under labels, and the essential properties they possess can be seen as having been inherited from the labels they fall under. Exemplars inherit all the properties of all the labels they fall under, and these properties are essential to them as they are to these labels. They are inherent to their definition. I, as a man, inherit all the properties of all labels I'm underneath, from creature down to man, through animal, vertebrate, and mammal. These are essential to these labels and therefore essential to me. They're conceptual, as can be understood intuitively. This hereditary principle depends on how sophisticated the hierarchies, the classification, the taxonomies have become in a particular culture. They are like totally absent within Chinese archaic thought, apart from what I mentioned, like nature being a water and mountain, or traction animals being ox and horse. As in the 17th century in Europe develop these scientific approaches, and quite amazingly enough, the first of the big taxonomies that we have in our culture is the one of angels, proposed by Thomas Aquinas. when he tries to explain why some angels are very close to God and some other angels can speak to human beings, like Gabriel when in the annunciation to Mary. Some angels are guardian angels, and they can send messages in some way or other to us. But there's a total hierarchy between these angels, which are very close to human beings, and the angels who can talk to God. And they lose power on the way down. And there's a 7-degree classification in Aquinas, which is the first time we have in the Western culture such a sophisticated taxonomy for things. Aristotle said of predication that can always be expressed as to A, B belongs. Blueness belongs to violets, colorfulness belongs to blue, one apple belongs to Eve and another apple belongs to my eye, like in the phrase, the apple of my eye. Thus the principle for making word pairs. To one half, the other half belongs. In common parlance, the elementary force that holds together the halves of a word pair is expressed as either is a or has a relationship. That those are the two basic links that compose the network was intuitively understood in the 1970s, at the very beginning of the knowledge representation debate in artificial intelligence. Attempts were made to create entire semantic networks from is a and has a relationship. As will be shown, although insufficient, this assumption was inherently sound, and I applied it with Anella, the piece of software I developed in the late 80s for British Telecom. Broadly speaking, the is-a relationship is what lies below the hereditary principle of organization. The has-a is what I call the endogenous principle of organization. I said earlier that the expression of one's feelings leads, in normal circumstances, to rational statements because the pathways being traveled over the network are channeled in those two particular ways. Pathways are etched in the mind, brain, and reflect recurrent usage. Conversely, etched pathways determine the relative ease of future similar associations. Most of the sophistication of our speech performance has its source here. It is a consequence of the fact that the network which we hold in the brain and which is composed of is a natural neurons made out of network. The fact that the network, which is the substrate for speech act generation, possesses a very structured topology reflecting both the hereditary and the endogenous principles, as I call them. This is the end of lecture number 10. I hope to see you soon for number 11. Bye-bye.